5 years of proving himself. 5 years of being called the Violent One. And now, in a burning corridor where smoke chokes the air and flames crawl closer, Daeyeon faces the moment that will define everything. A girl trapped beneath steel. A fire seconds from consuming her. Every instinct in his body screams to run. But humans don't run from danger. They run toward it. His muscles tear as he grips the beam. His lungs scream for air. The galaxy has already judged his species. Too brutal, too dangerous, too violent for civilized society. One choice will either prove them right or shatter everything they believe. The beam shifts. The fire roars. And in this split second, with death breathing down his neck, Daeyeon makes a decision that will ignite a revolution neither he nor the galaxy saw coming. What happened next? The observation deck of Stellar Academy stretched 300 meters across, offering students an unobstructed view of the twin suns that powered the station's energy cores. Daeyeon pressed his palm against the transparent aluminum, watching freighters drift past like silver fish in an endless ocean. 5 years he had been here, the only human student among 12,000 aliens from 47 different species. 5 years of being called the Violent One behind his back, though never to his face. He turned from the window when he heard the whispers start again. A cluster of Velian students stood near the botanical section, their translucent skin flickering with the purple hue that meant fear or disgust. One of them pointed at him, then quickly looked away. Daeyeon had grown used to this reaction. Last month, the Galactic Education Board had released their official report on Earth's history curriculum. The conclusion spread through every academic institution in known space within hours. Human historical records were too violent, too brutal, too dangerous for young minds. They recommended a complete ban on Earth history texts in all multi-species. Educational facilities thought the decision did not surprise Daeyeon. He had seen the way his professors reacted when he mentioned the world wars in comparative civilization class. The 3 instructor had actually fainted when Daeyeon casually referenced the estimated death toll. What surprised him was how much it hurt to be labeled this way, to have his entire species judged by their bloodiest moments. A proximity alarm shattered his thoughts. The station's emergency lights flooded the observation deck with amber warning pulses. Students scattered in panic as the automated voice announced a hull breach in Section 7, the Xenobiology Research Wing. Daeyeon's training kicked in immediately. He had spent his teenage years in Earth's mandatory civil defense program, a requirement his alien peers found horrifying when they learned about it. While they debated what to do, he was already running Section 7's corridors twisted like intestines through the station's lower levels. Smoke filled the air, and Daeyeon pulled his shirt over his nose, remembering fire drills from his childhood. In Bizon, most species in the galaxy had evolved on worlds without frequent natural disasters. They had no cultural memory of earthquakes, tsunamis, or fires. They did not practice for catastrophe the way humans did. This meant they also did not know how to respond when catastrophe found them. He heard the scream before he saw her. A girl, small and delicate, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. A Pelosian, he realized, one of the newer species to join the galactic community. She was trapped beneath a collapsed support beam, her leg bent at an angle that made Daeyeon wince. Behind her, a fire spread along the wall, feeding on oxygen from the breach. The flames would reach her in less than a minute. Daeyeon did not hesitate. He grabbed the beam with both hands and pulled. His muscles screamed in protest, tendons straining against the weight. The beam did not move. He repositioned his grip, planted his feet, and pulled again. This time, he felt it shift, just slightly. The girl stared at him with eyes like liquid silver, too shocked to speak. The fire crept closer, and smoke filled his lungs. He thought about his grandmother, who had survived the apartment collapse in Seoul when she was young. She had told him once that humans were built for survival, that their bodies remembered every disaster their ancestors had endured, with a roar that surprised even himself. Daehan lifted the beam high enough for the girl to pull her leg free. He dropped it immediately and grabbed her, throwing her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. She weighed almost nothing, her bones hollow like a bird's. He ran through the smoke, following the emergency lights embedded in the floor. His lungs burned and his eyes watered, but he did not stop until they reached the safety checkpoint where medical teams waited. He set her down gently on the medical platform. Medics swarmed around them, their instruments scanning for injuries. Daehan collapsed against the wall, coughing until his throat felt raw. When he finally looked up, the girl was staring at him. Her silver eyes were wide, but not with fear, with something else, something he could not quite identify. "You saved me," she said in heavily accented Galactic Common. Her voice was soft, melodic. "You are the human." "Daehan," he managed between coughs. "My name is Daehan." "Nare," she replied. "My name is Nare." She paused, then added, "That is a human name. My parents studied Earth culture before it was banned." Before he could respond, a Threnian medical officer pushed between them. "You need treatment," the officer said to Daehan. "Your lungs have sustained damage from smoke inhalation. And you," he turned to Nare, "your leg is fractured. Both of you will remain here for observation." The medical bay hummed with the soft sounds of healing technology. Daehan lay on a bed that adjusted itself to his body's contours, while machines repaired the damage to his respiratory system. Nare occupied the bed next to his, her leg encased in a regeneration field that glowed faint blue. They had not spoken since the medical officers separated them for treatment, but Daehan felt her watching him. "Does it hurt?" she asked finally. "The smoke damage?" "Not anymore," Daehan said. "The machines are good at their job. You did not have to save me." Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. "The fire would have killed you too." "I know. Then why?" Daehan thought about how to explain. How could he describe the instinct that drove humans to run toward danger instead of away from it? The cultural programming that made them protect strangers, even at cost to themselves. "Because leaving you there was not an option," he said simply. Nare was silent for a long moment. "The other students say humans are dangerous, that your history is filled with violence and war, that you solve problems by fighting." "They are not wrong," Daehan admitted. "Our history is violent. We fought each other for thousands of years over resources, territory, beliefs. We built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We still carry that capacity for violence inside us." "But you used that violence to save me," Nare said. "You fought the beam. You fought the fire. You fought to keep us both alive. That is different, is it?" She turned her head to look at him fully. "My people evolved on a peaceful world. We had no predators, no natural disasters, no resource scarcity. We developed technology through cooperation and patience over millions of years. We are considered one of the most gentle species in the galaxy." She paused. "And when that beam fell on me, I froze. I could not help myself. I would have died because I have no violence inside me. Not even the violence needed to survive." Daehan had no answer for that. He had never considered it from this perspective. Humans were always the dangerous ones, the violent ones, the ones who needed to be carefully monitored and controlled. No one talked about what that violence meant in contexts like this. "Thank you," Nare said softly, "for being violent enough to save my life." The medical bay released them the next morning. Daehan's lungs had fully regenerated, and Nare's leg had healed without complications. They walked together through the station's central hub, where thousands of students moved between classes. Daehan noticed the stares, more pronounced now. Everyone had heard about the rescue. Everyone knew the violent human had pulled a delicate Pelosian from a burning room. Nara seemed oblivious to the attention. She walked close to Dayan, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Will you show me something?" she asked suddenly. "Show you what?" "Your quarters. I want to see how humans live." Dayan hesitated. Students rarely visited each other's quarters across species lines. The cultural differences were too vast, the potential for misunderstanding too great. But something in Nara's silver eyes made him agree. His quarters were small, designed for a single occupant. Unlike the flowing organic spaces preferred by most alien species, human quarters were angular and structured. Nara stepped inside and immediately moved to his bookshelf. Physical books, an oddity in an age of digital libraries. She ran her fingers across the spines, reading the titles aloud. The Art of War, The Iliad, A Tale of Two Cities. She turned to him. "These are Earth books. I thought they were banned." "The ban only covers educational curricula," Daehyun explained. "I can keep personal copies, though I am supposed to be discreet about it." Nare pulled out a thin volume with a worn cover. "What is this one?" "Poetry, by a man named Yoon Dong-ju. He lived during the Japanese occupation of Korea in the early 20th century. He wrote about resistance and hope and the struggle to maintain humanity during oppression. He died in prison at 29. Your people wrote poetry during wartime?" Nare's voice carried genuine surprise. "We wrote poetry, music, painted art, told stories. We created beauty even when surrounded by horror. Maybe especially then." Daehyun took the book from her hands and opened it to a marked page. This poem is called Easily Written Poem. He talks about how hard it is to write even simple poems when your country is occupied and your people are suffering. Nare listened as he read the translation aloud, her silver eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "The Galactic Education Board says human history is too violent for students. But they never mention this. The poetry, the art, the beauty you created alongside the violence. They do not want to see it," Daehyun said. "It is easier to label us as dangerous and keep us at arm's length. Safer to ban our history than to understand it." "Teach me," Nare said suddenly. "Teach me the history they banned. I want to understand." Over the following weeks, Daehyun's quarters became their sanctuary. Nare visited every evening after classes, and Daehyun shared his books with her. He told her about the ancient kingdoms of Korea, about the Mongol invasions and the Imjin War. He explained the colonial period, the Korean War, the division that still marked his homeland when humans joined the galactic community. He showed her photographs of the DMZ, that scar across the peninsula, where two halves of one people stared at each other across minefields and barbed wire. Nare, absorbed, it all with an intensity that surprised him. She asked questions that no one else had ever asked. Not about the violence itself, but about what came after. How did people rebuild? How did they forgive? How did they maintain hope when everything was destroyed? "My species has never experienced this," she said one evening, sitting cross-legged on his floor with a book about the March 1st movement spread across her lap. "We have never had to rebuild from destruction. We have never had to forgive old enemies. We have never had to carry the weight of historical trauma." She looked up at him. "I think that makes us weaker, not stronger." "You are not weak," Daehyun said. He sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Talosians ran several degrees warmer than humans. "You are just different. Different and unprepared. When that beam fell on me, I had no framework for responding to disaster. No cultural memory of survival. No ancestor's voice in my head telling me to fight, to endure, to live." She reached out and touched his hand, her fingers cool despite her elevated body temperature. You have all of that. It is not a curse. It is a gift." Dayan looked at their hands, his darker skin contrasting with her opalescent shimmer. He had never thought of his heritage as a gift before. "The other students still avoid me," he said. "The faculty treats me like I might explode at any moment. Nothing has changed." "I changed," Nare said softly. "You changed me." Something shifted between them in that moment. The air felt charged, electric. Daehin was acutely aware of how close they sat, how her silver eyes reflected the light from his desk lamp, how her breath came slightly faster than normal. He should pull away. Interspecies relationships were not forbidden, but they were rare enough to draw attention. And he had enough attention already, but he did not pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. They fit together perfectly, despite the obvious differences. "I am glad I saved you that day," he said. "So am I," Nare replied. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it, "I think I am falling in love with you." The words hung between them like a confession. Daehan's heart hammered in his chest. He had spent 5 years on this station, feeling isolated, alien, dangerous. And now this strange, beautiful girl was telling him she loved him. "Nare," he started, but she pressed a finger to his lips. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." She smiled, a gesture she had learned from watching human media. Pelosians did not naturally smile, but she had practiced until she could replicate the expression. "Is this right? The smile?" Daehan laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. "It is perfect. You are perfect." The announcement came 3 weeks later, broadcast across every screen on the station. The Galactic Education Board had voted to expel Daehan from Stellar Academy. The stated reason was concerning behavior patterns consistent with violent human tendencies. The real reason, everyone knew, was that he had saved Nare. He had demonstrated the exact kind of physical capability that made other species uncomfortable. He had reminded them that humans were strong, fast, and capable of incredible feats when threatened or protecting others. Daehan stood in his quarters, staring at the expulsion notice on his screen. 5 years of work. 5 years of proving himself. Gone because he had done what any decent person would do. He heard the door chime and opened it to find Nare standing in the hallway. Her silver eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I heard," she said, pushing past him into the room. "This is my fault. If I had not asked you to teach me, if we had not grown close, they might have ignored the rescue. But we gave them ammunition. The violent human corrupting an innocent Pelosian with banned history. This is not your fault," Daehan said firmly. He pulled her into his arms, feeling how she trembled against him. "They made their decision based on fear, not fact. There is nothing you could have done differently. I could have stayed away from you. I could have let them keep thinking humans were just dangerous animals." She pulled back to look at him. "But I could not, because you are so much more than that. And I need everyone to see what I see. Nare, no. Whatever you are thinking, I am thinking that someone needs to stand up and tell the truth." A jaw set with determination. "I am thinking that the Galactic Education Board needs to hear from someone who actually knows what human history means. Not just the violence, but everything else. The resilience, the creativity, the capacity for growth and change. They will not listen to you. You are just a student. Then I will make them listen." The council chamber of the Galactic Education Board occupied the station's highest level. A massive spherical room where gravity generators kept delegates from 47 species oriented toward the central speaking platform. Daehan sat in the observation gallery, watching as Nare stepped onto that platform. She looked small and fragile under the focused attention of the most. powerful educational authority in known space. The chairman, an ancient Velian whose translucent skin had turned milky with age, spoke first. Young Noré of Palos, you have requested this emergency session to appeal the expulsion of Cadet Dayan of Earth. The board's decision is final and based on extensive psychological and sociological analysis. What could you possibly add to this discussion? Nare's voice was steady when she replied, with respect, Chairman, your analysis is incomplete. You have judged human history based solely on its violence while ignoring everything else that makes that history remarkable. I am here to provide context that your reports lack. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The chairman's skin flickered with the orange hue of irritation. The board's research was comprehensive. We reviewed thousands of years of human historical records. The evidence of violence is overwhelming and irrefutable. I do not dispute the violence, Noré said. But violence is not the whole story. 3 weeks ago, Dayan saved my life. He ran into a burning room, lifted a beam that should have been too heavy for one person to move, and carried me to safety. The board has characterized this action as evidence of dangerous tendencies. I characterize it as heroism born from a cultural understanding of sacrifice and duty. She paused, letting her words settle. The same history you want to ban is the history that taught Dayan to help others, even at personal cost. Yes, humans fought wars. They also rebuilt after those wars. They created art during occupations. They wrote poetry in prison camps. They formed truth and reconciliation commissions to heal from genocide. They landed on their moon during the same century they nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons. Her voice grew stronger. They are not violent despite their history. They are compassionate because of it. The chamber erupted in debate. Delegates shouted across species lines while translators struggled to keep up. Dayan watched Noré stand alone on the platform, her small form radiating defiance. He loved her in that moment more than he thought possible. The chairman called for order, his skin flashing aggressive red. This is unprecedented. A first-year student addressing the board about policy matters. Young Noré, you are out of line. Then I will speak from within the line, a new voice said. Dayan turned to see Professor Kelthane, his xenobiology instructor, rising from the faculty section. The old Thringian moved slowly, his forearms gesturing for attention. I have taught at Stellar Academy for 60 years. I have trained students from every species in the galactic community. And I can say with certainty that Cadet Dayan is among the finest students I have ever known. Other professors stood, adding their voices to Kelthane's. One by one, they testified to Dayan's character, his academic excellence, his careful respect for cultural differences. The tide was turning. Dayan felt hope kindle in his chest, fragile but real. And the chairman spoke again. The board appreciates these testimonials. However, they do not address the fundamental concern. Human history remains too violent for general education. We cannot risk exposing young minds to such content, regardless of Cadet Dayan's personal merits. The expulsion stands, and the ban on Earth historical materials will be extended to include all personal collections on Academy grounds. The words hit Dayan like a physical blow. They were not just expelling him. They were erasing human history entirely from the station. His books, his grandmother's letters, his mother's poetry collection, all of it would be confiscated and destroyed. Everything that connected him to home, gone. Nare's voice cut through his despair. Chairman, I invoke Article 17 of the Educational Rights Treaty. The chamber fell silent. Even the chairman's skin went completely transparent with shock. That article has not been invoked in 200 years. Then it is overdue, Noré said calmly. Article 17 states that any student may challenge an expulsion ruling through academic trial by presentation. I challenge the board's decision on Dayan's behalf. I will prove that human history, properly contextualized, is not only appropriate for education, but essential to understanding resilience, adaptation, and growth in the face of adversity. The chairman's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a deep purple. If you fail this challenge, you will also be expelled. Do you understand that? I understand, Nare said. I accept the terms. Daehan tried to reach her after the session ended, but galactic security kept them separated. Challenge protocols required isolation to prevent collaboration. He spent 3 days alone in his quarters, forbidden from accessing the station's network or communicating with anyone. His books had been confiscated pending the trial's outcome. He had nothing but time to think about what Nare was risking for him. On the 4th day, they brought him to the trial chamber. It was smaller than the council room, designed for intimate legal proceedings. Nare stood at the defendant's podium, her silver eyes tired but determined. She had not slept, he realized. She had spent 3 days preparing her case alone. The trial format was simple. Nare would present evidence and arguments for 6 hours. The board would then deliberate and render judgment. If she failed to convince them, both she and Daehan would leave the station immediately. Their academic records, marked with expulsion notices that would follow them forever. Nare began with the earliest human civilizations, but she did not focus on their wars. Instead, she talked about their stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh and its meditation on mortality. The Vedas and their philosophical insights. The Greek philosophers and their endless questions about justice and virtue. She showed how humans had always sought to understand themselves and their place in the universe. Even when that universe was hostile. She moved through history methodically, pairing each war with what came after. The Rome epochs, following centuries of conquest. The Renaissance born from the ashes of plague and conflict. The global humanitarian movements that emerged from the horrors of the world wars. The space age born from missile technology designed for destruction. She demonstrated the pattern: violence, reflection, growth, creation, over and over, throughout human history. Then she talked about Korea specifically, about a people who had endured invasion after invasion, occupation after occupation, and had responded by preserving their language, their culture, their identity. She quoted Yun Dongju's poetry. She displayed photographs of the Gwangju democratization movement. She showed the DMZ transformation project, where former minefields were becoming nature preserves. This is what human violence teaches, she said. Not just how to fight, but why to stop fighting. Not just how to survive, but how to live afterward. The board members listened in silence. Daehan watched their faces, trying to read the alien expressions. Some seemed moved. Others remained skeptical. The chairman's skin stayed a neutral gray throughout. For her closing argument, Nare did something unexpected. She displayed a star map showing Earth's location relative to the galactic core. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them constantly. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, diseases, ice ages. They survived by being tough, adaptable, and yes, sometimes violent. But they also survived by caring for each other, by passing down knowledge, by creating culture that gave meaning to suffering. She turned to face the board directly. You want to ban their history because it makes you uncomfortable, because it reminds you that survival sometimes requires violence, and that makes you question your own peaceful evolution. But banning their history does not erase what humans are. It just prevents us from learning from them, from understanding that resilience and compassion can coexist with strength and ferocity. That the same person who fights to survive can also write poetry and create beauty and sacrifice themselves for a stranger. Her voice softened. That someone like Daehan can exist. She stepped down from the podium. The chamber was completely silent. The board members looked at each other. their various forms of communication invisible to Dae-yun, but clearly intense. Finally, the chairman spoke. The board will deliberate. The verdict will be delivered in 1 hour. They waited in separate rooms, still forbidden from contact. Dae-yun paced his holding cell, unable to sit still. Everything Naray had done, everything she had risked, played through his mind on endless loop. If they lost, it was his fault. He should never have shared his books with her, never have let her get close to him, never have allowed himself to care about someone in a place that saw him as fundamentally dangerous. When the guard finally came to escort him back to the trial chamber, Dae-han's hands were shaking. He entered to find Naray already at the podium, her face unreadable. The board members had returned to their positions. The chairman's skin was now a pale blue, a color Dae-yun had never seen on a Velian before. This board has reached a decision, the chairman said. His voice was different, less certain than before. Cadet Nara's presentation was illuminating. She demonstrated aspects of human history that our initial analysis overlooked. She also highlighted a concerning bias in our research methodology. Dae-yun held his breath. However, the chairman continued. The board remains concerned about the potential psychological impact of unfiltered human historical content on developing minds. We cannot simply reverse our ban without proper safeguards. He paused. Therefore, we propose a compromise. The expulsion of Cadet Dae-yun is hereby overturned. He may remain at Stellar Academy to complete his studies. Furthermore, the ban on personal collections of Earth historical materials is lifted. Relief flooded through Dae-yun, but the chairman was not finished. In addition, we are establishing a new elective course, Comparative Trauma and Resilience Studies, with emphasis on human historical case studies. This course will be optional, but available to all students who wish to understand how civilizations recover from catastrophe. Cadet Naray will serve as teaching assistant for this course under faculty supervision. The chairman's skin shifted to pale green. We were wrong to ban understanding. We were wrong to let fear drive educational policy. This board apologizes to Cadet Dae-yun and to the human species for our hasty judgment. The chamber erupted in sound. Some delegates protested while others cheered. Dae-yun barely heard any of it. He was looking at Naray, who had turned to face him with tears streaming down her face. The moment the formalities ended and the barriers lifted, he ran to her. She met him halfway, throwing herself into his arms with a force that almost knocked them both over. "You did it," he said, holding her as tightly as he dared. "You actually did it." "We did it," she corrected. "Your history did it. Your grandmother's strength and your mother's poetry and Yun Dongju's words. They did it. I just made sure everyone was listening." Dae-yun pulled back enough to look at her face. Her silver eyes were red from crying, and her shimmer had dulled from exhaustion. She had never looked more beautiful. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it before. I love you." Naira smiled, that careful human expression she had practiced. "I know. I have known since the day you read me that poem about easily written things. You love me the way humans love, firstly, protectively, completely. I would not want it any other way." 6 months later, Dae-yun stood in the new classroom designated for Comparative Trauma and Resilience Studies. 200 students from 30 different species filled the seats, waiting for the first lecture. Professor Kelthin stood beside him, ready to provide academic oversight. And Naray sat in the front row, her silver eyes bright with anticipation. Dae-yun opened the first book, his grandmother's personal copy of Korean folktales, the cover warm from years of reading. "Before we discuss wars and disasters," he began, "I want to tell you a story. It is about a tiger and a persimmon and a clever rabbit. It is silly and simple and has been told to Korean children for hundreds of years. It has nothing to do with violence or trauma. but it has everything to do with being human. He looked out at the students, at their various forms and colors and alien faces, all watching him with curiosity instead of fear. Being human means carrying your history with you, all of it, the beautiful and the terrible. It means creating art in the midst of war. It means writing poetry in prison. It means lifting impossible weights to save a stranger. It means telling stories about talking tigers to children who will grow up to face their own challenges. He smiled. It means finding love in the strangest places and fighting for it when others say it is impossible. His eyes found Neray in the crowd. She was crying again, but smiling too. He held her gaze as he continued. My people's history is violent, but it is also resilient, creative, and full of hope. And if you let me, I will spend this semester showing you that those things are not contradictions. They are what make us human. And maybe, in some small way, they are what make us worth knowing. The students listened as he read from his grandmother's book, the story of the tiger unfolding in simple, timeless language. Outside the classroom windows, the twin suns set behind the station's curved horizon. In the soft light, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy, Daehin finally felt at home. Not despite his history, but because of it. And beside him, in every way that mattered, was the strange, beautiful girl who had fought to make sure no one ever forgot it.